I'm going to tell a story today as I walk around the lake in Nichita, and the story is pretty weird. I recently had a kid at the school lie to me, and I have a third sense, and I just asked the kid if he finished his project, and he said he did. And then I said, "Could I see it?" And he said, "I took it home, Mr. Hochberg." And right then and there, I knew that something was wrong, because most of the time the kids are very courteous. They will give me the project, let me inspect it, and I will give them a beautiful gift box for it, which I have to go out and buy. And it's a great way to display your ring if you made a ring or something like that. So the basic thing is in all of this is that I want the children to be on a level with me where they feel that they're comfortable. I'm not a threatening person in the room. I'm not there to give them a grade or make life tough for them. I want them to succeed. So my classes are generally pass-fail. I don't give exams or anything like that. What I want to be sure is that every kid is comfortable in the class, and they're going to undertake this journey into something they never did, where kinesthetic learning is the most important thing in your eye-brain relationship, and working as fine as you can possibly work. And I can get the kids, even in 8th grade, and I never did 8th grade before I got to this school. This is the first time they introduced this class to the 8th grade. And it's amazing. The kids, you can't distinguish the kids, the students' work from a 9th grader, 10th grade, 11th, 12th. Doesn't make any difference. They all work up to these commercial standards. In other words, they know the notion that when you make something, it has to be just as good as something you would buy in a department store. And those are some pretty high standards. So when they make a ring, I inspect the inside, the outside, the design, of course. I critique the design, and if they got it right. So I gave an assignment that was compulsory for the first assignment, just the first assignment. This would get kids to understand how to make metal soft through annealing. It's a process of heating the ring up to a light red, or the metal up to a light red, and then putting it in water. So that's what they do. They've learned the names of the pliers, the names of all the tools. Now these, I want to tell you, are the same tools that in the commercial world, every goldsmith, whether they're in Singapore or Malaysia or any part of Southeast Asia, they're all doing it the same way. And there's some dispute whether Thai gold is better than Singaporean gold, but it's a sort of legendary in the country that their gold is the best gold. Even though it's both pure gold, it'll have different values in different countries, because there's a lot of dispute that 24 carats is pure gold. Actually, it's not. I mean, if you wanted to get down to scientific evidence, it's 99.9 gold, but it's 1 point not gold. There's something in it. It could be copper, it could be silver. So these students are working with 100% silver, and that's not normal. Most silver stores and retail stores, malls, wherever you buy a ring or something, that's it's always 92.5. So there's a portion of copper in it, usually copper. Sometimes there may be other metals in it too, But that would have to do, and this is the legend, the thing that most ties believe and most jewelers dispense this as the truth. Well, it's 92.5 because it's harder than silver, and it is. That's 100% true. So it's scratch resistant, and it won't tarnish so rapidly when it's exposed to the air, and it won't oxidize at all. We call that a patina on silver. That's a very pretty name, patina, and that's what it means is the silver's going black. So I get to teach this class that no other teacher is teaching in any international school. It's so special, and that's why my heart is so in it. I created something that didn't exist before, and that was about 30 years ago, 35 years ago at ISB. I started this class. So the kids love it. There's plenty of responsibility, and responsibility for your own personal safety and the safety of the person who's working next to you. So they're working with two gases that can be an explosive situation between LPG, liquid petroleum gas, which is an inflammable gas, and then oxygen. Now, kids don't know what is flammable, whether both gases are flammable or one is, but now they know. And now they know the names of the tools, and now they have the pliers in their hands and the cutters and all the things they need, and a jewelry saw, and a wonderful workbench. So I built each workbench as a double bench. Two kids are actually facing each other. But the bench is curved, and it's very sturdy bench. You can bang and hammer on it to straighten out silver. You can do anything. And then I take this pleasure of walking in this so individualized room that has huge posters of the children that I've taught in the past, their successful jewelry, a lot of close-ups of jewelry. There's even a picture of me when I was 14 years old, the same age as an 8th grader. So often kids will see the picture on the wall and say to me, "Is that you, Mr. Hochberg?" And yes, that's me. That's what I look like. I look like the front of Mad magazine. I don't know if you know Alfred E. Newman. There's a picture of him in Mad magazine, and he's sort of an icon. I look like Alfred E. Newman when I was 14 years old. So anyhow, I've got this whole thing going. It's an industrial atmosphere. There isn't any social talking. Everybody's paying attention to what they're doing. They wear a dust mask. They wear goggles to protect their eyes whenever they're using a machine or fire in the classroom, and they use it quite a bit in the annealing process, making silver soft. When you work on silver with pliers or hammer on it or twist it, any of those things will harden the silver. So you can make a money clip that'll hold money together. So anyhow, what happened to me is pretty recently, I had this kid lie to me in class, who I like a lot. I've had him, he took me for a whole 2 semesters and came back now in the 9th grade. And so it became a question of whether he did the work or not. I had this one piece of work, and I seldom do this, where I had every kid in the class working on the same style ring with the infinity symbol on top and a shank that goes around your finger connected to it. They had to polish the inside and outside. They had to polish the symbol inside, outside, and then assemble it with torch soldering, which is no easy deal no matter what age you are. If you're 30, you're going to have problems. You really got to get the finesse of how to transfer the heat to exactly the areas where you're making a soldering joint. So to me, it's so amazing that I can teach this to 8th graders. They can do it safely, And I think it's just as amazing to the student. I think the student is really excited. So that's basically what I'm doing. And after this project, which I forced on them because it will bring them to a precipice of working with metal and bending it properly and joining it properly with this molecular solder that is harder than the metal itself, harder than the silver solder. So getting to know where that solder is going to melt, and then adding flux to keep the oxidation from happening, from turning the ring or whatever they're working on, the item, black. It's very important that they can get this finesse and understand how mass affects heat. So you have to sort of play the heat to heat the heavier and more massive parts of the silver first, and then finesse the heat over to the tiny thing you're trying to solder to a much larger thing. And this is an incredible challenge even for an adult, and these kids accomplish it in class, and they often make a very substantial joint which is very strong, and then they get used to how strong the joint is after it's made. It won't break. You can't bend it back and forth, and I guess you could fatigue it enough to break it, but it's hard. It's the same way bicycles are silver soldered together. Okay? So even in soldering and air conditioning, they use a hard solder, and it has some silver in it, but it's not as expensive as jewelry solder, which is very, very expensive because it's alloy and it's designed to melt at about 1550 or 1600 degrees Fahrenheit. And silver melts at 1650. So you could overheat it and melt your project, and many children have done it. And what do? They have to start all over again, bending and making the silver. Now, for this project, because I made it as a thing you had to do, the only project I didn't give them freedom on, I started my class because I knew it will give them the finesse with anything following that they design or see on Pinterest, one of the websites. There's so much good design out there. And now, even with their smartphone, they have the whole world at their fingertips, and they can see things that have been designed in New Zealand or Finland or Denmark. I love Scandinavian jewelry in particular, the ultra-modern stuff. So let me get back to this story. I'm going to try to tell it on my way around the lake. See, so a kid lied to me in class that he completed the ring, and then he said he took it home and gave me no chance to look at it or inspect it or anything. And I have good radar. And don't forget, I've got 65 years in this business. And I know when a person's not telling me the truth. So it sort of hurt me that he had to lie to me. And I told him he was lying, and he said no. And you know what people do when they lie. They just keep compounding it. They can't sit there and all of a sudden tell you the truth. They have to defend themselves. Oh, I just hate this situation. But I knew he was lying anyhow, and of course, it's all settled now. He admitted it. And anyhow, it hurts me that a kid doesn't find me like his grandfather and just let his guard down and do the right thing, tell the truth to the teacher. You know, that's important. It's important value. And it's not like I haven't done it in my lifetime. Of course, I've had a long life. Now, there are 2 times when I lied, and I'll tell you about one of them. That's a small story, and the other one's much more elaborate. But the first time I lied was when I was 9 years old. My memory is very accurate about this, very sharp. My father and mother decided to. My father was a dentist and a doctor, and he was making very good money, so I would say I lived on the upper end of the spectrum. I had parents that really cared about me and my brother, and we had a beautiful house in a beautiful neighborhood. If you ever saw Leave It to Beaver on American television, that was a white fenced neighborhood with manicured lawns, and it was the life of these kids in this neighborhood, this middle class neighborhood. It was great. I used to watch it. So anyhow, my parents decided when school was over during the summer, they're going to send me to summer camp. Now, my father had a patient. The poor man's name is Vince Lesneski. I say poor because he died. He was an athletic director for Pingree School, one of the finest private schools in the Northeast, in Elizabeth, or on the Hillside line, maybe in Hillside, New Jersey. Technically, I think it was over the line, maybe in Hillside. But Pingree School was super expensive. They had the money. They could have sent me to a private school, but they didn't. They sent me to a public school. So I went through the Elizabeth school system, and actually I came back to teach there. So this summer, we were all excited. We were going to go to Camp Waganaki. Did you get that Indian name? Waganaki. And it was in Waterford, Maine. Gorgeous area, Maine. It's central Maine. And they had a piece of property that was literally in the forest with a beautiful lake. I'm trying to think of the name of the lake, but that's not so important. Anyhow, we had to buy uniforms to go to this camp. And my mother and father bought Camp Waganaki shirts and shorts. And the thing that really sort of dock-jived me, and that's Thai word for surprised heart, was that when we went swimming in the nude. It was a boys' camp. So you didn't even have to wear a bathing suit in this beautiful lake. I know the name now. It just came to my little noggin. The name of the lake was Lake McGuane. McGuane Lake in East Waterford, Maine. You could probably look it up on a map. I don't think Waganaki's there anymore, since this is probably 70 years ago, 70 some odd years ago. And I loved the camp when I got there. They were all kids from all over America actually at the camp. It was a medium-sized camp, but they had loads of activities that you could do during the day, and you could choose an activity, every day a different activity. Well, they had sailboating, they had canoeing. I love canoeing. And they had archery. Does this sound familiar to any of you? Have any of you gone to summer camp in your whole life? It's a whole experience. It was the first time my brother and I were away from my mother and father. And we had a leader of a cabin that we slept in. And there were about 10, 12 cabins. And at dusk, or at a reasonable time after we had dinner. Now, they had a mess hall that was up on a hill. You had to climb the hill to have lunch. Climb the hill to go to breakfast. Same thing for dinner. And they had chefs, and they served a really healthy and nice dinner or lunch or whatever they made. It was really wonderful. We were all in this big mess hall with a big fieldstone fireplace, and there was a mouse, and he was like the mascot. The mouse ran back and forth on the fireplace for as long as I went to camp. It was amazing. It was amazing. And Mr. Lesneski was into healthy values, to live your life properly, don't lie, don't ever steal from anybody. But you know kids. We are kids. That's why we don't have our flight feathers yet. And I got some values in at camp. One of them was I learned not to lie. And I did lie, and I'll tell you the story. So one morning, I got in the gun activity. They had actual rifles, 22 rifles, and we shot at paper targets. So it was amazing, really amazing. And I wanted to do it so much. So I took that activity. Well, there were about 5 principal people in the camp, but the rest of the people were hired, and they weren't as significant as these people. These were the administrators of the camp. Well, it was run by one of the sub-administrators in the camp, and his name was Eddie Music. I don't think he's alive today. And Mr. Music, his father, I took an activity with him. It was woodworking. And we all made a little wooden sailboat with a real sail and everything, a little canvas sail. And we'd go down and sail it in the lake after we painted it and finished it and worked on it and shaped the bow of the sailboat. He had the whole recipe. He was like your grandfather teaching you woodworking. He was amazing. Well, his son ran the rifle range, and that's the activity that I picked on. And we actually learned about the 22 rifle. Where the bullets go in. These were single-shot rifles. They weren't BB guns. They were real. And the bullets, of course, were 22 long. They were, a bullet that's about that big. I took this activity. I was so excited. And then he went through a whole safety course. Of course, never load the gun before you need it. And never pull the trigger unless you're facing the target, and all these little silly things, but important things, so nobody was ever hurt in this activity. I think they've had that activity for years at the camp. So I got my 10 bullets. They came in a little block. I think Eddie's father from the wood shop made a block to fit the bullets for each kid that participates. I think 10 kids could participate at a time. And if a line gets filled up, then you just can't do that activity that day, but you could do it another day if you couldn't get it in that day. So I was so happy to get in there and get in with that bunch of kids. So we learned how to load the gun properly, how to take the shell out. It didn't self-eject from the gas of the bullet. So we had to pull the shell out of the breech of the rifle. And then we were taught how to aim the rifle. It was thrilling. It was amazing. This is a real gun. Here comes the lie. You ready for the lie? So we had paper targets, and they were rated 10 in the middle, and then maybe 8, and then skip a number was 6. And then 4, and the worst shot you could make is not hit the target at all and just be putting holes in the big paper target. So, and we had our own little pad, and we would stop shooting and go up and inspect our target so that we could correct our sight. You know what I mean? We could make adjustments on where to look at that sight, because there was a sight in the back of the gun towards you, and of course there's a little notch of a sight in the front of the gun. So we were taught how to aim, and we were taught how to correct our aim. They even gave us timeout. No shooting, put your guns down, go up and inspect your target and see what you have to do in order to get a 10, to hit the center of that target. So the first round that we shot, we were to shoot 3 shots. So this is what I did. Good old cheater Jerry. Can you imagine the pressure on me? I had to get that 10. So I went up there with my scoring pencil, and I hit the target twice, and once, I don't know where that bullet went in. Maybe I killed somebody in Norway, Maine, someplace. God knows. There was a big hill. You couldn't actually shoot a bullet where it would actually not know where it landed. It went into the hill. So it was behind the targets. So it was a very safe range. But here I am, 9 years old, with all this responsibility. I couldn't wait to tell my mother and father about it. So I went up and I took my scoring pencil and I pushed a hole through 10, right? I tried to make it look like the bullet hole, and then I came back and I was all excited. I was really dramatic and acting like crazy and going, "Oh, Mr. Music, I can't believe what I got. I hit the 10 in it. I'm so, oh, wow. On the first round of shots." And he looked at my target, and then he looked up at me and he said, "You're lying. You're a liar." And I said, "Oh, no, I didn't. I'm not lying. I hit the target. I hit the middle of the target." "You're lying. You shouldn't lie. I'm going to tell you that you can't come back to this activity anymore." Man, was my heart going. I was so nervous. I really never lied much before. But I'll tell you, the vehemency of that guy staring eye to eye at me. "Say the truth. That's a pencil hole. That's not a bullet hole." And I tried. This is what happens when you lie. You just can't stop. And you say, "No, it's not. I shot this." He said, "If I had a gun, I'd shoot you right now." That's pretty tough talk. He says, "You are banned from this activity for the rest of the camp season." I didn't know he was going to tell all the other instructors for canoeing and for sailing and the woodshop teacher and archery. He told the story to everybody. And he even told Mr. Lesneski, who was this muscle-bound guy who looked like 40 years old, but he was 60. I remember that because a few years after that, I worked at that camp teaching archery. And Mr. Lesneski died. He had a heart attack. Even though he was eating healthy and everything else, he was like a rock. He could go like this and a muscle would pop up, and he looked like Popeye. He wasn't too fat, but he was on the fat side a little bit. As an athletic instructor at the most prestigious school near my town called Pingree. It was a private school, Pingree, Pingry. He told Mr. Lesneski about my lie and that I couldn't be trusted and everything else. It got around. I know it got around. I was ashamed to go on with a lie and call my mother and say, "I did so good in shooting today," I almost did that, but I was damaged after he disciplined me. I was really frightened. No one ever talked to me with that kind of intensity. He scared me. He really scared me. He was a very fit-looking guy, young guy, and he had sky blue eyes. Blue eyes. I'm not used to blue eyes, especially when they're accusing you of lying. Well, the reason I'm telling you the story is that I never forgot it when I was 9 years old, and believe me, up to after that, I didn't even tell white lies. I didn't tell any lies anymore. I had learned my lesson from this guy and that little experience. The rest of camp was wonderful. We went on trips. We went on trips to an ore mine, and we were able to go down into a pit, pick up mica and all these beautiful rocks and make a rock collection and bring it back. We went to the Telstar operation, which was up in Bangor, Maine. Do any of you remember that? we had a satellite installation up in Maine where no city lights are, and we had a radio telescope there called Telstar, and we visited that in a big truck. All the kids got together, and that was one of our camp trips. It was really amazing. The rest of the camp, I did well. I played archery, I played everything there was to do, and I made a sailboat. But this had affected the rest of my life. And I realized it's wrong. It's just wrong to do it. But kids get their flight feathers that way. That's how you earn a feather for flight, for freedom. And it's one of the stories I tell my children in school. The second time that it occurred to me to do something larcenous, I'm sure a lot of you out there that are listening to this story have done much worse than I did. You know, my father and mother were pretty good at values and teaching you balanced values and what the world expects of you. So the second one is even worse. I had a teacher in college for Western civilization. He was so boring. He was a young guy, often put his feet up on the desk while we were reading a book, or while he gave some quizzes, minor tests and all. But the big test was coming up at the end of the semester. Now, I think I was a sophomore in college, and I was on my path to getting an education degree. So I had to pass this guy's class. I fell asleep in the class 2 or 3 times. He woke me up. He was the worst teacher. He wasn't even interested in history. And basically he was teaching us U.S. history. And I just could tell he was a young guy. Teaching was not his thing. And so here it comes. So I'm about 2 weeks from the test, and I'm shitting bricks. I'm worried that I'm not going to pass this test. You know what it's like to cram for a test, don't you? Well, I'm not very good at that, especially when the information is really boring. It was full of dates, full of conflicts that happened in history, and one conflict left the next. Never as bad as America is now. There weren't that many things to remember. Of course, we had to know the Constitution. We had to know specific dates. So, of course, I tried to cram and read the book many times. I'm a terrible reader. I wind up falling asleep. I guess you could call it deflexive. But I do. I just fall asleep when I start reading a long article, especially if there's no passion and it's a record of something. Because I have I just challenge everything that things didn't really go down that way. Maybe I'm just studying something that somebody put together, but it's not actually accurate. I'm one who contentious person when it comes to facts and stuff like that. Well, it came down to it. I was sweating this quiz, and how was I going to pass it? So I got a brilliant idea, and I thought it all through when I was sleeping. I wasn't really sleeping. I was thinking, how am I going to get through this? So I said, I know what I'll do. I'll fake an accident, and I'll come in looking really damaged. So I went to a surgical supply store, and my class was like 1 day away, and I thought, I'm going to use an earphone in my ear, wired earphone, to a cassette deck. Now, the smallest cassette deck you could buy in those days, this is more than 70 years ago. The smallest deck you could buy was about that big, and you had to buy 4 C batteries for it. You know how heavy C cells are? Ever ready C cells. So I bought the deck, and then I went to a surgical store, and I taped my whole head up and around my neck and everything, and I made a particularly large wound using cotton over my ear. So when I came to college the next morning, I came in limping. I had a crutch, and I was limping into college like this. And all the students that were in that class came running up to me. "What happened to you?" And I said, "I was in a terrible automobile accident, and I got thrown through the window of the front of the car, and my ear almost got cut off." Well, that was the biggest bandage, you know. I set them all up. That bandage was about 3.5, 4 inches away from my head. It was so packed with cotton. I left a place for my mouth and my nose to come through, and I went over one eye, and my whole head was a dome of bandages. And I got so much sympathy. Oh my God, they called me Jerry. Oh my God, Jerry. And then when I walked in, this guy was my teacher, who I had absolutely zero respect for. He didn't even notice me come into class. I made my way to my desk, which was in the center of the room, and I hobbled over. And then he said, "Mr. Hochberg." I said, "Yes." He said, "Come up here." I went up to the front of the room. All the kids were busy opening their books and getting to the chapter that we were up to at that point. And he said, "What happened to you?" And I said, "Oh, I had a horrible accident. I was in an auto crash, and I went through the front window of the car." He said, "Oh my God, are you okay? Can you take the test?" I said, "It's a week away, or 2 weeks away, I think." He said, "Yeah, I can take it. I'm going to take it. I need to take that test." So he said, "Well, I can give you another quiz that won't be their actual test, and you could take that instead if you can't make it to take the actual exam." I said, no, I want to take the actual exam. I've been preparing for it. I hadn't done a damn thing for it. I was lying like hell. So that class went by. I hobbled out, and then I secretly got into my car and drove back to my apartment. Now, the next class was 2 days away, so I had to look like I've improved somehow. So I started to take bandages away from me. I took the one on my neck off, the one that crossed my left eye. I took that one off, and I made myself with makeup look a little bruised, you know. And I came back to that class after the 2 days that went by. I came back again, and some kids came up to me and said, "You look a little better." I said, "Oh, I'm improving. I'm still not walking right, and my right ear was almost cut off, so I don't know how long it's going to take to heal. I'm just going to have to wait it out. I mean, I'm just so frightened that I'll have no ear at all." And they said, "Oh my God, don't think that way. You think more positively." And then I went in, and that guy, as unimaginative as he was, my teacher, he didn't even notice that I improved. So I had another 2 days after that. I had the class again, and I took more bandages off. So I was working my way to my ear. I took one of them and strapped over the top of my head, and most of them that were on my face, and some small ones that I put on, I took those off, and I appeared in class. I came to class in 2 days. Well, kids came up to me and says, "My God, you are healing very well. You're improved. It's amazing." I said, I think I'm much better. I'm still worried about my right ear. This much bandage, 3 inches out, and there was a dome over my ear and my neck too. I bandaged that side up a lot. I came in, and this time the teacher looked at me and he said, "You look like you're getting better. You're going to be all right for the exam, right?" I said, "Yeah, I'm going to be fine. I'm doing much better. It's just my right ear that I'm really worried about now because it was almost severed." He goes like this, "Almost severed?" I said, "Well, I don't really think I'm going to have a right ear. But you can still take the test, right?" I said, "Yeah, I could take the test, but..." So that's all I'm really worried about right now. He said, "Well, it's good to see you looking better." He gave me one of these casual, jock-like punches in the shoulder. You know that punch in the shoulder? You're gonna be all right. You're gonna be all right. He gave me that kind of punch in the shoulder. And I went back to my desk in the middle of the room. And I picked up the book. And I tried to read it. But I actually fell asleep. You know. And then the class was over. Everybody started going out. And then the teacher came over to me. And he woke me up. He shook me. He said, "Jerry, are you all right? You all right?" And I looked up and I realized I fell asleep in the class. And I said, "Yeah, I'm under such medication now. I'm so sorry. I want to apologize for my inattentiveness." He said, "Don't apologize. It's okay. I hope your ear's going to be fine." I said, "Me too. I've been just thinking about it, and I'm feeling so much stress about my right ear." So now I'm 2 days away from the end of the course and the main exam. Nobody I know is as crazy as me and would go through this much effort as I went to just to lie. Because all I wanted from this guy, I didn't want an A or a B or anything. I would have been happy to get a C. So here's what I did. I took my Sony cassette recorder and I read the book from all the chapters that we were supposed to read for the course. I read the book and I read it very slowly so I could get it onto a Sony cassette. I popped the cassette in and then plugged a one earphone mono earphone and put it in my right ear. This was in my apartment, and played it back. And then I tried to adjust the volume so I could hear it. And then what my plan was when I got to the test, certainly I couldn't answer specific questions, but I could write all the dates that we learned that were significant in that period of time, which I think at that time was the Revolutionary War, what happened during the American Revolutionary War. So I tried to write as I was listening it back, and I realized that I talked too fast. So I had to make another tape, read the book again, scan it, and tell all the significant dates and events that happened in linear form, just the way they were in the book. So the day of the test came. I spent 1 hour taping this huge. In those days, anything portable was still huge. They didn't have micro recorders or micro cassettes at that time. The format for music and everything for recording was just a normal cassette, but a huge cassette recorder. Even the portable one was huge. It had 4 C batteries, so you can imagine how big the machine was. And then I had to figure out, how am I going to turn it on? So I found they had a little remote hole for a remote. I didn't have a remote, so I bought a switch and wired it to the right size phone jack and plugged that into the little hole that said remote. And when you threw the switch, the tape recorder went on. When you extinguished the switch and turned it off, the tape recorder wasn't powered. But it would start up kind of slow, like into legible speech. But in the beginning, it's not legible. So, and I ripped my pants apart and ran the wire to the switch in my pocket. Then I ran the earphone wire up underneath the bandage and bandaged over it, and then put it in my ear, and I kept the form of cotton that went over my ear, so I didn't have to make it all over again, and I put that on my ear. This is in the morning. I started at 6 o'clock. The class wasn't till 10. So for 2 hours, I'm sweating it. I've got these bandages on. And then I forgot something. What about my neighbors? They've been seeing me walk out of that apartment every 2 days, bandaged up, but then I'm well again when they see me again. And they asked me, they came down from the units above me. I was in a basement apartment. So some of my tenants came down and they went, Jerry, why do I always see you with bandages on, but every 2 days or so? I said, yeah, I'm in a play. I'm an actor in a play, so that's my part of my costume for the play. And that was a great answer. I did that one right on the fly, that lie. That was a great lie. I came up with it just like that. Yeah, I'm in a play and I have to do this. We practice every 2 days. Oh, that's why you're bandaged every 2 days. I always wonder what's wrong with you. And then you have it on again, you know. So you're okay? I said, yeah, sure, I'm okay. I'm in this play. I've got a leading role, too. I embellished it a little bit. And then I drove to the college, parked in the parking lot. I still kept the stick, so I had to walk with a stick and a fake limp like this. And I got to the classroom, and the guy was right at the door. He was handing out the exam as you walked in. And he said to me, you all right? I said, yeah, I'm fine. He says, you look better. You look a lot better. I said, thank you. So I had been setting this up for weeks. And I went to my seat in the middle of the room, put the exam down, and I started to read it, and it was comparison questions about comparing a certain period of time to another period of time that was similar when the president did something, and I had to know those dates and all. But I did have the whole book on tape. Can you imagine me? And guess what? I urinated in my pants a little bit too, and that's how nervous I was. I was under such stress. And of course, I immediately got religious, and I'm going, dear God, please let me get through with this, and let this end, please, God, and don't strike me blind for lying, please. I began writing right between the questions, filled the whole page up. It was a 2-page test, and I ran out of paper. In the meantime, my voice is coming back to me through the earphone, just telling me these dates and the book. So I was listening intently, and I even had to get up from my desk and hobble over as fast as I could, get 2 more pieces of paper from the teacher. I asked him, could I have additional paper? And he says, you don't have to write that much. I said, no, I want to write it all out. And he gave me 2 pieces of paper, and I went back and I'm writing like crazy. I filled out 4 pages of text, and there was even more. Page 5. And then there was more, and I had to write on the other back of the other paper, and I wrote page 6, right up in the left-hand corner with a circle around it. And then he said, all right, the time is up, I'm collecting everything. Well, my life was over at that point. My fate was in the hands of God, and then I went home and I prayed too. I prayed, please God, let me pass this test. So the next class, we got our tests back, and on my test there was handwriting. I said, oh shit, did I fail? And I read it, and it said, Dear Jerry, he wrote this on, you did not regard the questions at all. You didn't regard the questions at all. I know I didn't regard the questions. And he said, but you have a sense of the book, and you remember the important association, the dates, and what happened very accurately. More accurately than I could do that. I'm absolutely amazed. So I'm giving you a C, I can't give you a grade on the exam because actually you didn't address the exam at all, but your memory is incredible. Incredible. Well, listen what happened to me. When I was taking the test, this girl was sitting on my right. She kept looking at me like this, like a monkey. And I would look back at her and go, "What's the matter with you?" You know, giving her the face that says, "What's the matter with you? What's wrong with you?" And she was hearing my earphone. She didn't know where the sound was coming from. All she would hear is, and she kept looking at me and looking up and down and looking around, looking up at the ceiling of the classroom. Where's this sound coming from?